Greetings, all you lovely people out there. So glad you could join us here on the BeautySeed. And this time we sat down for a chat with Megan Henry, aka the Savage Meglet. And it was her interest that we get into some lawfare. And for all of you out there in a legal mindset, this is not meant to be legal advice. This is for entertainment purposes only and should be taken as such. That said, we did get into some of the lawfare, legal versus law, public, private, all of those things. And Megan had a number of questions for me that I helped answer as best as I know how. And, I learn all the time. She's learning all the time. And we got into some things that we all might like to know more about and know more about ourselves through the lens of that law. As we discover more thoroughly how our own internal landscape and stories and all of those things affect our knowledge, comprehension, and understanding of that landscape of law, or the ocean of law, or the air of law, and all of those things that come into play as we traverse this realm, this landscape of perception and overlays of identities and all of those things that inform this walk through life. So yeah, I really enjoyed the chat with Megan Henry, who was one of my Enlifted coaching the mentors that were guiding us through our certification process with that. It was life-changing, and I really enjoyed her in that setting and in this conversation as well. So hope you all get a lot out of it and enjoy it. If you are able, head over to BeautySeed Studios and donate, share it with your friends, like it, all that booty hot about bip bip bip. Yeah. So y'all know all that. And sit back and enjoy this chat. All right, grace be upon you, and enjoy. Welcome to the BeautySeed. Meglet, welcome to the BeautySeed. We have the Savage Meglet, Megan Henry, who was one of my favorite aspects of the Enlifted coaching method that I went through the certification for. It's been catalyzing and life-changing. I'm sure it has been for you as well. And if you're out there in the audience and you're not familiar with it, check it out, because the stories we tell ourselves are really powerful aspect of how it is that we unfold in life. And really happy to welcome Megan to the BeautySeed.
Thank you. I'm very stoked. I'm like, do we play a language game or what do we do? What do coaches do when they get together? Is it a cardinal sin if we don't? I don't know.
It might be. I mean, we let's take out the might. It's a cardinal sin. See, we're already doing it. We don't even have to try.
That was good. That's what builds it.
Yeah. How did you get into Enlifted? Let's start there.
So I'm a former pro athlete. I competed for Team USA in a winter sport called skeleton. So for the listeners, it is head first, 85 plus miles per hour on what looks like a tea tray, going down the same track as bobsleds. If you ever saw Cool Runnings, you know where it takes place. I had a lot of negative stories that prevented me from actualizing my desires. So what I wanted to happen and what was actually happening were not in alignment. And that pushed me to be very interested and go down the rabbit hole on the power of our mind and mindset, subconscious mind, all of those things. I ultimately was an Olympic alternate in 2022, and I retired after that. And I knew that like going into sports psychology and mindset coaching was going to be the next step for me. And so I did go back to school. I got another master's in sports psychology.
Wow.
And honestly, everything that we do in Enlifted is way more useful than my degree. No offense, Lock Haven University.
Well,
it just was
Yep. That's what I meant by catalyzing all of the other interests and things that I've been studying over a lifetime.
Mhm.
The Enlifted method catalyzed all those things into a useful framework that really is the tip of the spear that is the iceberg of my experience. Right.
Definitely.
So go for it.
It's very like you said, it's something practical. You can use it. It's simple. It's repeatable. Everything I learned in my degree was very theory. So for me, it seemed like a waste of time. It was a waste of time. um, and it was good. It was a good experience, right? And so I was on Instagram actually, and so I saw Clint, another Enlifted coach. I was looking at his company, which is the name of it is escaping me, but it'll come to me. And in his bio, it said like Enlifted level 3 coach. And I was like, what on earth is that? Like, I've never even heard of that. And then I saw Daniel DePau, another Enlifted coach, came into my feed. Like, so all of these things were directing me towards Enlifted. So I looked at what it was and I was like, oh, this is it. This is definitely it. And, books my call with Kimberly and she just answers. Just they're all very chill, right? There's no pushiness. There's no super salesy, like grossness about it. So I was hooked. I loved the energy of the people. The community is so solid. So it was very
Supportive.
very serendipitous that it came to me. So I
Awesome.
attracted it. That's just
And in our we had a couple interactions in the coursework when Mark was teaching on uh, some aspects of what is often termed the sovereign movement. This uh, law versus legal, the public versus private, the overlay there. And for your own exploration, how much of the Enlifted story work that you did on yourself played out in your perception of that space, and what brought you into wanting to explore that?
um so how did I come to explore that? Well, definitely I think what opened my eyes was even the very simplest thing was the definition of a citizen. So and I was just like, man, we've been doing all of it. Can I swear on here?
Oh
I'm
yeah.
assuming, yeah. Okay. I mean, we've been doing all this shit our whole life. Nobody's ever asked any questions, including myself. I've never asked any questions. I've just like filed my taxes and there's actually nothing in place to penalize you. And it's actually written in US code, like a statement that you need to write to just opt out of this system. And like we've just
Yeah.
unknowingly entered all of these contracts in our whole life. So for me, that was just mind blowing. And then, I go down the rabbit hole looking up all this stuff and my whole family thinks I'm nuts. But so right now I'm like gathering, I'm still in like the gathering information stage versus taking action on it. And that's because I'm also in the military. So I would have to have like this dual citizenship, so to speak. And yeah, but it falls very much in line with the enlisted and like the stories you tell yourself and just never questioning your own thoughts. Right. And as we learned it in enlisted, like question your thoughts, question these
Think
stories, like
about your thinking.
think about your thinking. Yeah. And when I do end up talking about it, even from my limited knowledge, and ask people questions, I mean, they are absolutely mind blown, right? It just is unfathomable that this could be possible, right? And it's very, very interesting. So I'm totally interested in what you're doing.
Yeah. So
Oh,
a leading question. I'm leading the witness. I admit it. You're welcome to overrule this.
okay.
Um, and but point being, how do the stories that we tell ourselves actualize and play out in law?
Ooh. Um, the phrase that comes to mind when you ask me that is like, this is the way it's always been, or this is just how it is, right? Um,
Yeah.
and so, yeah, I guess in terms of law, the stories we tell ourselves. So I'm struggling to answer this question because I'm thinking that it's above me, right? So that's a story, right? That this is above me, and that well, I didn't make these laws, right? These are the stories that are in my mind that are coming up as you ask that question. So really interesting to
Yeah. So this comes to one of the fundamental things. It's like, who does make law?
right.
And how do laws become codes, acts, and statutes and all of these things? And so there's a fundamental relationship that you touched on, and it has to do with identity. It has to do with you took on the benefits and privileges of becoming an officer in the military or an enlisted member, whatever your relationship with is. And with those benefits and privileges of being a part of that institution, you took on duties and obligations. Now, you could renegotiate that I actually don't want these benefits and privileges and step out of that with the proper protocols. But essentially, what I'm trying to illustrate here is that we, through these identities, and it could be as simple as the story we tell ourselves about being a mother or a father or, you know, a citizen, like you said. That is a hat that we put on. It's the actuality of who we are. And so the story work to me is getting down to the fundamental level of who we are so that we can, from first principles of that relationship with the I am, come into an awareness. And that awareness then becomes attention. And the more I dig into it, maybe you have a sense of this, the more I dig into it, the more I realize and become cognizant that our attention is actually the medium of exchange, that overlay of government. And so if we are not aware of where our attention goes, then we are more willing to give up our uh, privileges and whatnot in exchange for duties and obligations rather than the other way around.
Wow, definitely. I like that. You touched on the identity and just being willing and able to allow that identity to change. So I'm experiencing that. One, I experienced that when I retired from an athlete. I slowly had identified as being an athlete. And then my perception and just I've enjoyed my time in the military. However, I feel it's my time to leave. And I'm at an interesting point where the story that I get fed constantly from people when I tell them I'm thinking about getting out, because I've been in for 15 years, about half of that is active duty time. You can only get any retirement benefits at 20 years, right? So everybody's like, you're nuts. Why wouldn't you stay in? Like all of these stories, like you're 5 years out. I'm like, 5 years is a long time to do something you don't like. Yeah. and my story has changed. Like when I first joined, I was much younger, right? I was in my early 20s. And the story I had told myself is that it was this honorable thing to do. I'm serving my country. That was the story. And so now I'm like, I don't really feel that way anymore. My feelings have changed. My story, my personal identity has changed. Yeah, I'm still holding on to this identity of like, well, it's honorable to be there. And like, I like being a captain in the Army and people like respect me. And, there's still these identity and stories tied to that part of me, which isn't necessarily representative of the whole. Like you said, it's not your whole identity. So yeah, it's very interesting, crossroads that I feel like I'm at.
Well, to bring it back to the law aspect of it, inequity, you painted that picture and you've said it yourself. The benefits don't kick in for another 5 years. So that benefit is a contractual aspect where you have decided to take on the benefit in exchange for your time and service. Now, that is a privilege that you will garner with condition.
Right. Yes. Very much conditional.
now you're wanting to renegotiate the contract, and that renegotiating of the contract are the duties and obligations of enough benefit to take on, the privileges and all that go with it. And so under the contract law of the Constitution, that is totally permissible that you would renegotiate a contract. And, the government actually cannot step in to intercede in any personal contract. That's in a private contract. Now, the sticky part is that you have made a contract under administrative procedure through the War Powers Act, which I'm not going to get too far into. However, you see where the disentanglement
Yeah.
is part of the issue. And how does that disentanglement occur? And for me, it occurs by looking at that story we've told, like you just told a whole story about the relationship of your story that you had around this idealized honor, which I actually find there's a lot of truth in that. Is it your truth? Is it somebody else's truth? And that actually, if you come to what is true to you, then you can step into that negotiation, not as the fiction of that overlay, the captain hat.
Right.
I am a woman who at times acts as a captain of the U.S. Army, and I want to renegotiate this because the benefits and privileges don't match up with the duties and obligations and no longer serve my interests in who it is that I am in creation. And that is a powerful place to come from rather than, Daddy, I don't really want to do my homework tonight.
Yeah. I don't want to do this anymore. So when you say like renegotiate, so again, I got stories that come up in my mind, like you can't renegotiate a contract with the Army. It just is what it is. The flex stage that I said before. And which I don't even know if that's true, right? It's just, that's what I have been told, right? It's a story that someone else told me, that you can't renegotiate a contract, that you just do not get benefits if you get out before 20 years. There's certainly ways around it. Like, so something that I'm exploring now is, so I did skeleton for 12 years. I suffered from traumatic brain injuries. And so I'm exploring that route and utilizing that as a way to end my service. I've met my mandatory service obligation, so I can walk away at any point now, which is great, right? That's awesome. And the thing that's keeping me there is, well, one, even though I'm a reservist now, so I go 1 weekend a month, it's a predictable source of income. And the carrot, right? These benefits, and oh my gosh, I can get when I'm 65 years old. Because as a reservist, I can retire in 5 years. I wouldn't get those benefits till I'm 65 years old. And I'm like, that's nuts. That's nuts to sacrifice the next 5 years of my life for something. I'm 36, right? That's years away.
A long time till then.
So it's crazy to me. So when you say like, well, you can renegotiate this contract, I'm like, well, can I really? Right? That's the question that comes to mind.
I mean, it's in the definition of a contract. What is it? What's your definition of contract?
Well, this one is an obligation that I agreed to.
So implicit in it is that there's an agreement between parties to enact in certain ways with each other, right? Now, contract technically in Black's Law and in other books is a negotiable instrument. So
interesting.
Any negotiable instrument might be considered a contract. And so, you look at the word, it's like contraction. You are confining yourselves to a certain set of principles to work within to simplify an engagement in commerce.
Yep.
Technically. I mean, not even technically. That's my intuitive sense of it. And so so law has three main premises. One is to come to honor, provide remedy, and remove controversy. And so in any contract, there has to be lawful, even if you go out into administrative procedure, admiralty law, all these other subdivisions of the legal system, there has to be, it's a requirement that there be some way to come to remedy when the contract no longer serves either party.
Yeah.
Right? And to not allow that is dishonorable. So understand your contract. Look at your contract. You have
I was going to say, I haven't looked at mine in a long time.
yeah. So that might be a place to start, is to look at your contracts, and those contracts show up all over in our life. There's the social contracts that we make with people, as far as I'm going to be nice to this person because if they do, they'll show up again to help me chop wood when I need help. Or there is the trust agreement with my local coffee shop. I forgot my wallet. I'll pay you next time I come in. There's all these agreements that we make up that are actually contracts. And then there's the codified contracts of like a bill of sale or, gainful employment or compensation. Are those the same thing? If a word sounds different and is taken to mean something different, are they the same thing?
No?
Okay. So if a contract is a contract and you have a contract with the U.S. military, it must fall under the definitions of a contract, right?
Right.
And so if it falls under the definitions of the contract, then it must be a negotiable instrument.
Interesting. Okay.
However, you signed that document, which makes it bond, meaning that you have to come to honor within the reasonable remedy provided within that document. So to come to honor means that you need to respond. You need to come to, you need to notice them that there's some conflict within this contract that you'd like to remedy. You have to provide some idea of what you think would be remedy. There's a number of things that you can do to, it's like, we can tie it back to Enlifted. Answers, push, questions, pull. And in honorable negotiation of those contracts, what's more honorable? To give them a demand and say, I want out of this contract and you must do this.
Right.
It's my body. Or to say, this does not seem to serve me any longer in my long-term trajectory. How do I come to remedy within what the U.S. military has on offer to honorably discharge this requirement? Right?
Yeah.
And we can use that throughout life. So how have you found clarity in yourself to ask better questions?
Oh man, definitely in coaching and being comfortable in silence, listening to people, that has helped me formulate better questions versus feeling like in conversations you constantly have to fill the space. Right. I will say that in my head, I ask a lot of questions about like this contract and all that stuff. And I have yet to go outside of myself and ask those questions to anybody for fear of, well, like you're crazy if you think about getting out. That's ridiculous. You can't negotiate this contract. Like I just have made the assumption in my mind that I cannot ask these questions, which isn't necessarily true, right? That's not true. You can ask questions anywhere. They're not going to take you out back and shoot you. So
yeah. Well, unless you are dishonorable.
Right.
Literally, actually under the War Powers Acts and things of that nature, or tribunal. Actually, those tribunals move really fast because they're all about lawful remedy and honor, and they're very functional. And most people have forgotten how to come to honor in their lives. They have an ideal of what honor is.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me ask you this: what does honor mean to you?
Um, Staying true to your word,
Okay, so the
or
word.
true to yourself, like what is important to you, your value. So when I say that, it's interesting because I'm like, well, am I being honorable to me by staying in this contract? So
Okay,
great question, coach.
so yeah, if you are dishonorable to yourself, how easy do you think it would be to be dishonorable to the contracts that you make in life?
Oh, well, you would think it would be easier to be dishonorable to those contracts. I do not feel that way, though. I feel that,
Yeah, I know it's a trick question.
okay.
And really listen. I said, if you're dishonorable to yourself,
Yeah.
is it easier to be dishonorable to the contracts you find yourself in? The transverse of that is if you're in honor with yourself and your word reflects that interior space, it's much easier to come to honor your contracts. And what I'm getting at here is that a lot of people find themselves in controversial situations and they freak the fuck out.
Hmm.
And that fear that you were just talking about gets in the way of clarity, right?
Right.
It gets in the way of clearly looking at the contract that you signed because you're overlaying it with all the fears and anxieties about every little part and particle that makes up the document. And the document becomes a thing rather than your word codifying that agreement, because it really is your word that codifies that agreement. It makes it law.
Yeah.
And if you're honorable within yourself, it's much easier to express what is dishonorable about that contract. Does that make
I
sense?
like it. Yes. Yes, it does.
So,
Um, I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to get my contract out, which is pages and pages of stuff.
mhm,
Um, I mean, the good thing is I've fulfilled my original contract, right? And I have fulfilled my agreement,
mhm.
and I could walk away at any time. I just would, by doing that, by not fulfilling the 20 years, right? Then I don't get those benefits. Um, Luckily, even though I still feel entangled, I realistically could get out at any time.
Yeah.
And like you said, like how can I honorably negotiate these benefits to where it would be something I could still obtain, I could still get without fulfilling these 20 years?
Mhm.
Um, so excellent questions that I'm going to ponder for sure and
Oh,
write
good.
down.
Oh, good. So yeah, I mean, my main point is that people look for a guru for answers
Mhm.
so that they can parse all the complexities of the legal society. You know, usually starting with administrative procedure and all of the codes, acts, and statutes, and the Universal Commercial Code and the UCC of the United States, and how they interact with um, the Constitution. But the Constitution's not actually at play unless you bring it forward. So
Hmm.
it's like we're learning how to know where we actually stand and which game we're playing so that we
Right.
can operate within that game, within the rule set of that game. Um, Now, you can step out of that game and play your own game, is what I'm suggesting.
Yeah,
That,
for sure.
that comes from an interior knowing and an interior understanding of who it is that you are and your relationship with creation, first and foremost, like as a first principle. And from that first principle, then you can more readily find the way in to look at the foundations of how it is we went from law, common to I, as in, I don't like what you're doing. Could you stop? To common law, enough people didn't stop that over time it became, you and I decided that it wasn't right for those people to be able to keep doing that without some kind of remedy in place. And those remedies became codified. Now we have those codified remedies that became complex interactions between social networks of business. We get into things like contract law and commercial law and maritime law, where you have complex arrangements of payment systems where you're paying out to multiple parties at different levels, and there are interactions where a failure to perform and all of these things come into play that interlock much more layers of complexity and layers of complexity on that. And then you have, the overlay of that with municipal governments in how it is that tariff systems interact with a larger overlay. And you can see the building blocks of these layers of complexity that all have a very simple root. And that simple root is operable if you come from there into those other things. It's operable within any of them. But if you are already out in the ether, in the air, the swirling mass of codes, acts, and statutes, and you don't know who you are in their momentum. And you don't have any footing. You don't have standing. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And like coming from, that origin of self, and then entering the the swirl that you were demonstrating there, then it feels like you're playing 5D chess, right? Where you're like, okay, I have a knowing. And what's interesting about like all of these contracts that we unknowingly, or like I knowingly entered this contract, right?
Yeah.
Perhaps without full understanding.
Ignorance is dishonorable, and once you become cognizant of that aspect of the contract that you didn't know about, ask for clarity.
Yeah. That's a good avenue to go along as well. So I really appreciate that. And I think like we enter these contracts and just have given up our knowledge. And I mean, as I say, knowledge is power, right? You just enter these things without question and without really knowing. And that's where like society wants you. They want you to be without knowledge and not knowing like what it is that you're agreeing to, or the powers that you do have.
What do you mean by society?
I would say the government. Like the government wants you to be in a position where you don't have knowledge about any of this.
This is a fundamental aspect of the whole principle of law. Who is Mr. or Mrs. Government?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I know, it's a great question, because it's like
I've never seen them. I've seen collections of men and women who operate in conjunction with each other to provide a service that we call government. Great. You know what I found that's really fascinating? When I remove the overlay of them, this externalized Mr. or Mrs. Government, and I go into what I have questions about, I'm like, I want to get clarity on how is it that I agreed to pay taxes? And I go into that relationship and I call Mr. or Mrs. Agent of the IRS and I go, oh, Bill. All right, Bill. You sent me a bill. I'm curious, how did I sign up for the benefits and privileges of this? And where's the remedy to, like, it doesn't feel right to me. How can you help? When I go into it with that realization that there's a man or a woman on the other side of that phone who at times acts as IRS agent and actually in their heart of hearts knows and feels that they are there to provide a service to be helpful to the greater good, because they actually don't understand. They don't know their own rules. They don't know where the money goes after it goes into the IRS accounts. They don't know any of these things, and that's okay.
Yes.
We're actually there to be educated and to help educate and have a conversation between equals.
Yeah. I like that personification.
And so what happens that I found is angels show up in the architecture to help you find out how that works. And so, this digging into the story about our fears and anxieties of the overlay of authority
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
really helps us to clarify those relationships and interactions that we have so that we can go into them with, "Ugh, all right, buddy. How are you? How are you today? What are we gonna get? This is what I have on my mind. I'd really like some help. I don't know. Let's find out." A
um,
very different energy than, "I can't believe you charged me this extra $10 on my IRS 1099 form. I'm not an employee. I'm a sovereign on the land." It's like, they don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Sovereign on the
yeah.
land? Then why are you filling out a 1099 in the first place?
Right.
Yeah, funny stuff. Um, what
It
was,
is.
yeah,
Glad.
go for it. No, no, no.
Oh, I was gonna say, another enlisted coach, Taylor Morgan, had that interaction with the police. I don't know if you saw his. Oh, well, so he was driving. He was using the right to travel, right? And the police officers did not know what he was talking about. They had no knowledge of it, and so it's interesting to take that perspective of like this person thinks that they're doing the right thing. They are upholding a service for the greater good, and educating them is also like an honorable thing for us to do if we have that knowledge. So I just wanted to share that bit. Like there are people on the other end of the phone that you're
Yeah. And the
complaining
other thing
on.
is, like, you've had it told to you and written it down probably more times than I could count. The victim mentality depends on a habituated process and attribution. When you bring that phrase into the overlay of police officer,
Mhm.
how habituated are they to a certain interaction with people who think that they are the authority?
Right? Yeah, very.
So you can go into that interaction knowing that they have a gun. They're used to knowing that they have the authority to use that sidearm as they see and deem necessary, and that they are operating within a certain set of rules and schema that are scripted for them.
Mhm.
And so you can show them how they can work within that script to provide remedy, come to honor, and remove controversy. And once you look at it through that lens, I got pulled over on my way down to a friend's living wake the other day. He's a fantastic human, somebody who's actually going to be having an interview soon. Chris Radcliffe. I was on my way down there. I was a little bit in a hurry because I got out of my place late, and it was a long drive. And I had some business stopovers on the way down to maximize my drive time. I was in the high desert coming through California towards Nevada, and I was doing 78 in a 55. And the car in front of me was doing not much slower than that, but a little bit. And I saw the police officer pass me and pull a U turn. And I'm like, I slowed down, got ready to pull over because I knew. Yeah, okay, great. And young man comes up to my window, and I'm like, I'm looking over here. I'm like, oh yeah, duh, traffic. So I'm like, I should know better. Sorry about that. Yeah, we're all about your safety. And set up.
Aw.
Well, it was genuine.
Yeah.
It's set up, but it's set up a exchange that was personable and human and not in fear or anxiety. I'm like, okay, I did that. Great. I wasn't traveling. I was driving with a registered vehicle, doing commerce, and I'll abide by the rules of that which I signed up for, which is a license to drive.
Mhm.
Great. I limit my liability greatly by not having to carry $1 million bond and carry the liability if I were to harm or kill somebody with my automobile doing 78 and a 55. I looked at him and I said, I'm really sorry that I was doing that. I thought I was following the flow of traffic. I got carried away. I was listening to my own CD that I just got finished making, and I was rocking it out, my own music. And he's like, you make music? So, and we got into this whole conversation, and he went, mostly it's Memorial Day weekend. We're looking for people who are drunk driving. You're obviously not intoxicated. Please do both of us a favor and keep it slower and get where you're going alive. And I'm like, that is totally reasonable. I can do that. And yes, I want to make it to my destination, and I don't want to harm anybody else. I'll keep it slow. And he went, have a great night. So how differently could that have gone if,
Right.
if the sidearm that was in my back of my pants, which it was, because I carry, if that sidearm was something in my forebrain, like, okay, he's got a gun, I've got a gun. Oh shit. Is this legal for me to have this in the state of California? Is it too short a barrel? Is it too high a magazine round? Is it okay to have the armor piercing rounds that I have in it? Is it oh shit. Okay, this guy, he's coming up. Hands 10 and 2. Okay. How differently would that interaction have gone if I came to that situation? Like if you've been in those situations, you're a captain in the Army, for fuck's sake. Have you been on deployment where the energy of someone is like, oh shit, this guy is shady?
Oh, for sure.
On with this person, and it escalates the situation.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you have one you want to share, or you...
I don't have one that's coming out to the top of my head.
Okay.
If I do, I'll bring it up. However, just even in your illustration of what could have been if you were catastrophizing or thinking of the worst case scenario, you see how like where your attention goes, energy flows, right? But also, even though you were just illustrating that, how different your delivery was of those questions. And even though that would have been something in your mind that was silent, right? Your composure, your energy, how you're breathing, all of that changes. And so I thought that was really interesting, even though it was just like a demonstration of like what this could have been like. And I love that you did that and that you shared that. And because it just is that reminder to show up with the energy that you would like to receive in return when you're like negotiating these contracts or just simply asking questions. If you're able to keep your breathing low and slow and able to keep your thoughts in control, and by just demonstrating that like genuine curiosity, how different these interactions can be. So really, really grateful that you shared that.
Yeah, it's a funny ride out there when you start your door into the greater world. And yeah, Greg Paul, who is a mentor of mine, I studied with him doing The Sovereign's Way. I don't know if you've heard of this coursework. Powerful stuff. One thing that he said is really changed my perspective. Well, it was a perspective I had, but he put it in language that was really accessible. And that is that the universe wants us to have our desires fulfilled. So when we go out in the world with a desire, it will be fulfilled because that's the nature of creation. The sticky part is that if our desires are obfuscated by our fears, anxieties, worry, or our projections of what that person can do for us rather than how we can interact and build and create together, then our desires are fulfilled, but they're fulfilled through the unclear and obfuscated lens of our own bullshit. So,
a really blurry lens.
So we get bullshit in our lives, otherwise known as controversy. And so if you go into something to remove controversy from a controversial state of mind, an embattled state of mind, then a nice question I have for myself is this action, word, or activity, actions and behavior, is that going to remove controversy or is it going to add controversy? it's a great litmus test for our
Yeah.
activity with others.
And like communication is the number one skill in anything, in any relationship in life, in leadership, in sales, in your relationship with your spouse, right? Like 72% of divorce is caused by communication issues where people can't communicate clearly with one another. And to come at it from that standpoint of like, am I adding controversy here? Am I being a empathetic person to the human being that's on the other end, the receiving end? And in my experience, I find that it's more difficult the closer the person is to you to have that empathy, which is sad. Um, and just like, can I have that like genuine love for this person, even though I don't know who they are? They could be on an IRS agent on the other end of the phone. They could be someone, a career counselor for the Army that I'm talking about my contract with. So yeah, I really love that. I love that.
Yeah. I mean, so fundamentally, it's like, can you, whoever's listening to this, can ask this of themselves, do you feel like you can love someone without the need to agree with them
Uh,
or like them? Fill in the blank.
okay.
Um, and if you answer that in the negative, then is that exchange that you think of as love accurately described as such?
Right.
You know? And
Yeah. What's
these,
your definition?
so these are the fundamentals of law, oddly. Your ability to come into negotiating contract is directly resulted of your ability to create clarity within yourself to express your needs and desires to the universe and thus to the person in front of you clearly and concisely.
Amazing.
Right?
I'm taking notes with my magic wand.
Good, because I charge a lot of money for people who want to do this work with me individually. So you're getting added value here.
I feel very privileged.
And yeah, I think, yeah, like I said, people go into those engagements so full of fear about the result that they forget to show up for themselves in the most fundamental ways
Well,
and lose sight of how it is that they're building that for themselves in that desire that they have for their lives. So yeah, it's a little trying at times having the perspective on those things and going into the world. And it's been a challenge for me of knowing that just because I have more information does not make me better than that person I'm engaging with. And there's a funny little trip of the ego
definitely.
that goes, well, I have done the work and they haven't. And I think it's a fundamental key aspect to how it is that we find ourselves developing the walls and barricades in our lives that lead to looking at people as the other. It's just anyway. I've been marinating on that quite a lot lately. I've really come into clarity on does the aspect that I have a mental capacity make me better than any other creative spirit, spark
Right.
their own input and influence in this wild exchange that we call life.
Yeah.
It's so trippy.
I think that taking on the perspective for me personally of like, we all came to the planet with a specific journey to us that we were supposed to experience in this lifetime. And the other night, I'll share a totally random aside here. So the other night, I just moved to Florida recently. I moved to Florida in February. I've only been here for a few months. And there was the building I'm in is super nice. It's very new. And you need a key fob to get in basically anywhere, which is great. It's very secure. And there's this person in the hallway banging on someone's door clearly inebriated under the influence. And it goes on for a bit, kind of ignore it in my apartment. It's right outside my apartment. I'm in there with my boyfriend. We're talking. It goes on for about 30 minutes, and this person is banging. They're definitely drunk, and they're yelling at this person to let them in. And so it's like, do we say something? You know, what's the honorable thing?
Do I want to get involved?
Right. So my boyfriend ends up going out and asks the guy, like, are you all right? And that clearly whoever you're here to see is not in, or they would answer the door, or they don't want to see you. So if you're going to stay here, like, can you keep it down? Because it's like 9:30 at night or something. Yeah. So he's like, there's other people in the building, and like they're trying to wind down, and you're being really loud. And it turns out that this guy had smeared human feces all over the elevator. I mean, it stunk in the hallway. It smelled like shit, literally smelled like shit in the hallway. And he had smeared it, like, for whatever, you know, in our mind, the initial reaction is like, what the fuck? Why would somebody do something like this? Mm-hmm. And I luckily took the perspective of like, this guy is clearly in a lot of pain. Like, he's screaming for attention that he's going to rub his own shit on the fucking wall. And so, you know, my boyfriend's like, he's got to clean this shit up. And, and they had like EMTs come look for this guy and all this stuff. And, his girlfriend, who was there to see, it was a super put together person. And you're like, how are these two people together? And I'm like, she's here to learn something about being with this guy. And like, he's teaching her something, and this is his journey. Like, he is learning, or may not learn, how to cope with the pain that he experiences. And like, this is his way of doing it. And rather than like having to have like a reason why somebody is doing something, I need to know, like, why is this person smearing shit on the wall, right? It's like, this is the journey that they chose. Like, you know, mine's different. It's cool. I'm not better than this guy because I don't drink, right? I'm not better than him.
Don't smear shit on the wall.
Right. Like, am I better? I might be more sanitary, but but yeah, just having that, like, that compassion in that moment to be like, you know, this is the journey that person's on. And, you know, we all have our reason for how we operate and do things. And like, even though we may think we know more, yeah, it doesn't necessarily make us better. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you said it really well when you were like, this is obviously someone who's in a lot of pain. And I think it's easy, especially given the present circumstances in the world, to lose sight of that knowledge that so many people out there are running around with a shitstorm of a story that sometimes reflects itself in the actuality of a shitstorm.
Sorry. You'll remember that shit story, so.
Oh, yeah.
Getting gumdrops, there's shit on the fucking walls.
Yeah. So, how are you liking Florida?
I love it. It's great. I mean, I have not experienced a full-on summer here yet, nor hurricane season. So I'm optimistic that I will love it regardless. Go ahead.
Are you on the Atlantic side or the Gulf side?
So I'm just north of Fort Lauderdale. Okay. And so I'm like a 12-minute walk from the beach. So, you know, like in hurricane.
Great, and
it is great. It is great. And I do love that very much, because that is coming from a winter sport and being in winter all of the time. It's very cool to be able to walk to the beach and see a sunrise or a sunset. And amazing. I feel very blessed. So, yeah.
So you can see a sunrise and a sunset at the same beach?
Well, you wouldn't be able to see it. Yeah, I know. You wouldn't be able to see it. So it's sunrise, and then you can look behind you and see
which is
sunset.
amazing. Yeah.
which is still cool. It's still cool to
It's
be on the
awesome.
beach. Yeah.
I have spent a little bit of time in Florida. My dad lived on the Gulf Coast
Oh, nice. Very pretty.
in Alabama, on what's known as the Redneck Riviera. Yeah, it was cool. He had a boathouse. You could drop the boat in the
Oh,
water out the
sick.
back door
Yeah.
and get in the inland waterways, inland passage, go to a restaurant, go to a bar, go to other people's houses for, uh,
That's
whatever.
awesome.
Uh, with the easy trip to the Gulf of Mexico, easy trip to the Mobile Bay. Yeah, it was a good scene. I liked it, and
Yeah.
it gave me opportunity to go to New Orleans and visit my future wife. So, and
Awesome.
we've been together for 11 years now, which has been
Oh.
fantastic. And yeah, you were talking about the interpersonal, uh, keeping compassionate and empathetic in those more personal bonds, getting our own stories out and being able to look at them, draft, craft, and supercharge those stories, as we say, has been really powerful in creating an atmosphere of further growth in my personal relationships, and my ability to show up to them with more clarity has been game changing.
Definitely.
I have been more of a transpersonal kind of person. It's very easy for me to sit and listen to somebody else's story and go, "Yeah, that's your story. All right, great." And that's not a great place to be all the time when you're dealing with your wife or your mother or your siblings. It's nice to be able to really engage from a genuine place of real caring and compassion in those spaces, and check in with a clearer, closer representation to what I'm putting out in the world.
That's awesome. I know. Good for you. Because it is. It's different. It's just different with people closer to you. So that's really powerful, though.
Have you noticed that is getting easier for you in your own life, or?
Um, my boyfriend and I communicate very, very well, and with my the rest of my immediate family, there's definitely some stories there that I think I've taken a really good perspective, not to be self-grandiose,
Yeah.
but it's challenging when their stories from past things they just haven't let go of them, right? These things that happened decades ago, these stories holding on to. That part I find challenging at times, to be like, oh my gosh, this story again, right? I've heard this story a million times. That part is challenging. It's definitely a opportunity for growth on my end. And I try not to push coaching onto somebody, especially my family. I don't want to come across as a coach or like that. I'm better than you because I've done this. I try to genuinely ask questions and just hopefully I invoke some sort of self-awareness on their end. And it hasn't quite worked yet.
Well,
I'm willing to keep trying.
For me, the difficulty in especially dealing with family is that those stories that they tell themselves about their experience of the family life, I'm entangled in.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm a part of those stories, and that projection onto me, the difficulty for me is, how much do I allow their story of me
Right.
or the actuality of my path in life?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm a strong-willed, fiery guy.
Oh.
Yeah. And it comes through in that, how dare you overlay your story onto what I know is true of me? And I'm
Yeah.
I'll push back and I go, oh, yeah, right. I don't need to knock them down just because they have a different perspective on what they see in reality.
Yeah.
And that's been really hard to come to and come into balance with, because, you know, it's we do develop these, for lack of a better term, psychic strands with those closest to us, and these
Definitely.
entanglements with, history. And
For sure.
how
And it
well,
tugs at your ego too, like
yeah,
to be like you have a completely wrong representation of me,
yeah.
having that perspective. Or yeah, like just bringing
So
up,
let's play a word game.
oh, let's do it. Okay.
Okay,
Go
so
ahead.
you just say that sentence again. You have a wrong perspective of
A
me.
wrong, wrong perspective of me. I think that's what I said.
Yep,
I'm going to write it down.
yep. Write it down. Let's draft that.
All right.
So read that back to me.
You have a wrong perspective of me.
What's the energy? Describe the vibe. What's that set up?
Defensive.
Defensive. Okay. Where do you feel in your body?
My chest.
Chest? Great.
Chest.
So let's take a deep breath. Let's change one word.
Let's do it.
I have a wrong perspective of me.
All right, let's do it.
So
I
read
have
that
a
back.
wrong. Oh, sorry. I have a wrong perspective of me.
How's that change? What describe the vibe of that?
Ownership.
Okay.
It feels. So the first sentence was defensive. This feels much more relaxing of a statement. So
Right?
yeah.
So if you take that knowledge of yourself, that your perspective of you shapes that engagement and energy, what does this mean about you moving into the law space, in developing that kind of clarity to really see where your energetics are being fluttered?
Oh man, I like that. So when I think about this in terms of what we talked about today, in terms of like my contract with the Army, for example, um, even just this sentence, okay, I have a wrong perspective of me, of what it means to be honorable, what it means to fulfill my contract and be in the Army. Like that's not necessarily something that I need, right? That I've taken on this uh, identity of I am a captain. You got that right first time. Yeah, captain in the Army. Um, and that doesn't define who I am. So yeah, I'm putting a lot of weight onto that. And yeah, have a wrong perspective of me because I have so much more to offer than just that and that contract.
So let's change that one more time. We're
Oh
going to
shit.
change wrong to inaccurate.
Okay. Read it.
Yeah.
I have an inaccurate perspective of me.
How's that land?
It's better. Wrong feels very judgmental. And this feels like, oh, it's a mistake.
So a mistake is something that can be, I'm going to bring it back to law. A mistake is something that could be remedied by seeking forgiveness.
Ooh.
And who is it that you're seeking forgiveness from ultimately?
I feel like this is a trick question. Me?
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so a wrong is a very dire thing.
Yes, it feels it.
When we characterize our actions in the world as wrong, as opposed to incorrect or inaccurate, we are setting up something in law that a wrong is a great, it's mistake is something, okay, I made a mistake. I'm going to come to honor. I'm going to acknowledge it. I'm going to give you an easy remedy. We haven't gone too far down. You gave me one letter and I'm stepping forward to handle the matter. I'm going to settle this now. A wrong would be like, okay, I'm going to ignore the first letter from the IRS because I don't want to pay them. But why should I? I'm going to ignore the second letter. I'm going to ignore the first notice and the second notice and the third notice. And then they're going to call me and they're going to go, did you want to settle this matter? That's what would be considered a wrong. And then that sets up this set of paradigm where we are right before being in a trespass, which is a biblical overreach.
Hello.
We have gone so far past coming to honor that we are now deeply, deeply in dishonor. So much so that we might end up in court. And so when we characterize our path through life through the lens of right and wrong, we are setting up this dichotomy of very, very serious and powerful linguistic cues to ourselves that may or may not be accurate about the experience we're going into. They may not be accurate in terms of, like, is this actually something that I have done to someone or myself that is so extreme that it is wrong? Or is it simply inaccurate? Is it something that I can shift my perspective on, and all of a sudden, it's not like, your car has been totaled in an automobile accident that you hurt somebody in, you caused harm to somebody. That's wrong. So, the shift of perspective, all of a sudden you can see an avenue to forgiveness, coming to honor, providing remedy and controversy, removing controversy. Whereas, so the fundamentals of these actually are our stories about these things.
Yeah.
The words we use to describe them to ourselves and to the world. So, we'll unpack. Read that sentence one more time.
I have an inaccurate perspective of me.
How's that change from the first reading to this reading?
It's similar. It's just it feels more accurate.
Does it feel like something that you could change within yourself?
Yes, it does. It feels like there's a opportunity for remedy.
Which makes it actionable in the world. That's me putting my 2 cents in.
Definitely.
Can't help it.
It's okay. It's a good coach right there.
Yeah, the coaching thing is fun. What's your trajectory with your coaching? Where you want to go with it? How are you trying to, or not trying, how are you shaping that so it works within your time preference and within your business sense and those things? What's your next steps?
So initially I had labeled myself as a high performance coach and was geared mainly towards athletes. And I love that. Like, I absolutely love working with athletes. However, I felt like my skill set can assist people outside of that space. And so now I'm transitioning to do athletes, coaches, and entrepreneurs / corporate space. And because I think we are all high performers, whether we identify with that story or not. So I'm expanding. I hear it all the time. You need to pick your niche. Like, who's your niche? Got a niche down. And so that was my initial niche. And I'm like, well, I don't necessarily feel like I have to I pick one person or one segment.
Whose story is that?
Yeah. And I'm like, I feel like I can serve a greater amount of people, as well as like honor me and the skills that I can offer at a price point that is rewarding for me, like energetically, and that makes sense to support my living. Versus, and this is also a story, that a lot of athletes don't have a lot of money if they are young, and they're depending on their parents. And that's just what I have found. I was one of those people. I was a self-funded athlete. I didn't have any disposable income. Right. So, which is like
half-athlete.
No, I said athlete. Oh. half an athlete. So that definitely contributes to that story. However, I want to serve a greater group of people because not everyone is an athlete. And I just feel like, yeah, I have a lot more to offer than that group. So right now, that's what I'm doing, restructuring like who I'm targeting. I relabeled myself as a transformational mindset coach. And so I'm working on that as well as transitioning from most of my work right now is just one-on-ones and scaling it into more of a group coaching setting. So that's the vision trajectory for the future.
Cool. Well, let me know if there's anything I can do to help. And
Thank you.
any final words for the audience and where to find you and all that good stuff?
Awesome. So I'm at the Savage Meglet on Instagram. Definitely give me a shout. I respond to most of my DMs. And well, I respond to all DMs that I see. I don't spend all day on my phone. However, I will respond at some point. And I love getting questions about any of this. And yeah, I mean, that's me. I'm the Savage Meglet. Savage High Performance is my website under construction. So it's nothing there right now. And
But by the time this comes out, it will be done.
Oh,
'Cause-
abracadabra.
because she knows how to set herself a deadline and
Exactly.
things up. So go check out Savage Meglet and all of her offers, because I know from personal experience that she is as much of a badass as she sounds like she is, and knows how to show up for whoever she happens to be working with, and is very insightful and helpful in what she offers. So I suggest whoever's listening certainly check her out. Follow her on Instagram because she does put out some cool content. I follow her on Instagram. You
That says a lot.
Yeah, show up for each other, and we'll show up for you.
100%.
Thanks for coming and hanging out on the BeautySeed with me, and I really enjoyed our chat. You had some questions for me coming in, and I know that I did much of the talking. Perhaps we'll have another conversation, and you can do more of the talking.
Amazing.
These are topics that are near and dear to my heart, and it's also how I show up for my community outside of this interview thing, which is often me talking to other people. And almost every time I get off at the guests are like, I feel like I should be asking you more questions because you seem to have a lot of knowledge in a great many areas and a lot of interests, and I do. And I'm learning how to create space and clarity so that other people can share their stories. And so there's a little bit of both. And it's
I loved it.
great. Been really great. And you're helping me with my value added offer, because one of the things that I'm working through is my, I help propositions and all of those things. And the thing that I most often help people through is come into clarity in how they show up to negotiate and renegotiate contract. So
Amazing.
great. You helped me come to a lot of clarity in myself. So thank you. See, Meglin is on this call, and she's coaching me the whole time. I didn't even know it. That's how savage she is.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Abracadabra.
Abracadabra. Thank you, sister. I look forward to talking to you again real soon. And love and light. Be well, and we'll talk soon.